Thank you, man. Hello. This talk is about chatbots. I squashed in a little white slide, but it's not that dark in here, just to wake you up, so it's not working as I expected it to be. So, my name is Marcel Pociot. I'm a developer from Germany. You can follow me on Twitter if you want. And when I'm not working at my company, I'm mostly doing open source stuff. I really love giving back to the open source community, just as a lot of you do, because I think it's really important to, as we all use open source software, to give something back. So I have quite a few packages available online. With all the BotMan stuff, I think it's about 40 now, which have 450,000 downloads. I also developed a Laravel Chrome extension, which some of you might know. You can use it to record your Laravel tests with it. So it's just like a boilerplate to get started with Laravel testing. Yeah, so if you want to check out some of my open source work, you can go and do that on GitHub. But this talk is about chatbots. Most of them are not as evil as the T1000. And to sort of know what a chatbot is, I looked up at the definition of Wikipedia, and it says that a chatbot is basically a computer program that you can use to interact with your users. It's a computer program that conducts the input, be it textual or from an audio interface, and then processes it and responds back to the user. So a lot of people try to make a chatbot be as human as possible so that you don't really get the difference if you're talking to a computer program or not. But the way I see it, it's just another interface that your users can use to interact with your application. So that's how you should see chatbots. It's just people can write to your like Facebook page, use that input to process it. So you should see it as just another user interface. And just to give you an idea what chatbots can do and how you as developers or business owners can use them, here are some examples. For example, we have this Slack bot in our own company chat, and it's connected to the Laravel Forge API, and we can use it to just like set up new development sites. So it has a simple API. It's create site, then we tell it if it's a dev environment or a test environment, and then it's the repository name. And the chatbot just uses it to create a database for us, clone the repository, create the site on Forge, deploy it, and just spit out everything in Slack. So this is not only useful because, I mean, you can do it in Slack where you are all the time when you're working, but it's also useful to spread the information to your team. So if I type that in, the whole team sees that I just created the site, and they can just click on the link and instantly get started. You might recognize this guy. He also has a chatbot using BotMan. And what it does for him, it's more DevOps, or for the Spatie team. So you can tell the chatbot, give me the DNS records for a specific domain, so in a more natural language. And it just looks up the DNS information and prints it out. So once again, it's also sharing information with the team while being able to do it in the environment where you are, like in Slack. And besides all the development-related tools, it's also getting more and more important for brands or marketing terms. So this is from TechCrunch, which is like a big tech news site. And they have a Facebook bot, and you can just write the Facebook page, and it responds back to you, and then it gives you the option to subscribe to one or multiple RSS feeds. So it starts a conversation with the user. You can subscribe to the feed. It lets you choose that you want to receive an update like every day at a specific time. And The good thing about this, compared to like traditional email marketing, is that the conversion rates are much higher because the whole messaging platform and chatbot thing isn't that crowded with spam. And if you receive a message on Facebook Messenger, you're more likely to read it than it's just an email from TechCrunch. So I think this is really important for brands right now. And just to give you an idea of how important it's going to be now and in the next couple of years, this is just a comparison of the 4 big social networking apps, so the number of users, compared to the number of users of the 4 big messaging services. And as you can see, the number of the messaging users started to increase like in 2015. So the target audience for chatbot development is there, and everyone's basically just waiting for you to deploy and develop applications that they can consume and interact with. So as we're developers, we want to create our own chatbot. But when we get started, we initially have to choose which platform do we want to support. And there's a broad range of chatbot platforms available. This isn't nearly all of the available services. And so you have to initially choose at least one platform which you want to use. And to give you an idea of how this works in a more abstract, technical way. So if we take Facebook Messenger, for example, you have to create an account at the Facebook developer page, set it up to your Facebook page, and then you create a webhook that gets sent to your application. So the user types something into the Facebook Messenger bot, then Facebook gets the information, sends it to your webhook, and then your bot application needs to see if the incoming request is actually meant to be for the chatbot or if someone is just posting data to your endpoint. You have to validate the data that was sent. So if someone types a command, should we actually listen to it as the chatbot? And then you have to figure out, are we maybe in a conversation with the user already and have to reply something different? And then again, once we figured all that out, we do whatever this chatbot should do, and we need to respond back to the service. And when you look back at the chart with all these messaging services, it all works a bit different. So, for example, Facebook sends JSON data to your endpoint. WeChat sends XML data. And the same is if you respond back. For Facebook, you need to do a post request. For WeChat, you also need to send XML data. Skype, you need to do some OAuth thing. So it all works a bit differently. And that's why I came up with the idea of having a chatbot framework that allows me to abstract the functionality of these systems into one single API so that I can just connect multiple services to it. And that's what BotMan does. BotMan itself is a PHP package that is framework agnostic, so you can use it with whichever framework you want. You can also use it standalone, so there's no requirement to any framework at all. But, you know, as we all really love Laravel, and I do too, I created, it's called BotMan Studio, so it's pretty much a bundled version of BotMan with Laravel 5.4 right now. It'll be updated to 5.5 once it's released. And it makes the configuration of the drivers, so the messaging services, a lot easier with Laravel coupled. So you can just install it via a BotMan installer. It's a global composer requirement, and then you can just write BotMan new, just as you do with the Laravel installer. And so the nice thing with the Laravel integration is that it allows us to add custom artisan commands to connect the messaging services. So with BotMan Studio, if you run the BotMan list driver command, this is how it looks like right from the beginning. It shows you all the messaging services that are supported out of the box from BotMan, and it shows you whether or not they are installed in your application. And so if you want to connect, for example, Facebook to your chatbot, you just use the BotMan driver install command, Facebook. Then it downloads the composer requirement, installs it, and it also publishes the configuration file. So it works pretty much like the new package discovery feature in Laravel. But in addition to just telling BotMan to use this driver, it's also publishing the configuration file for you. So you just need to call this command. Then you end up with a configuration file. I tried to document it pretty good. And then you just paste in the service tokens, and you're good to go. All right. So if we take a look at Chatbot development, there are like 3 pillars of how it works and how chatbots actually function. So first, they need to hear the user input. So they need to actually capture it. Then you need to process it, like is it a text that I actually should listen to? And then you should respond to it. Now, let's take a look how this works with BotMan. So once again, I tried to stick with a very expressive API that makes it simple to read and use. So here, we're just telling the BotMan instance that if a user types the word keyword, we're going to jump into the callback function, and then we reply, hello, my friend. Or if you're not that much into closures, you can also use the class, add method, syntax, and so in this way, you define all the keywords or the commands that your chatbot should listen to, and at the end, you just say BotMan listen, and when the API endpoint receives the request, it just goes through all of these commands and tries to figure out which command to call. Now, the cool thing is that this presentation is actually written with BotMan Studio underneath, so I can just try it out and talk to my chatbot, which is now just making an API request to localhost, and it's calling BotMan. This is what the web driver is for. So. And once you set up messaging services, this is just like how it looks like, just this really same example on Telegram or on Facebook Messenger. So it's just one API, and you just connect the different messaging services to it. And you're not restricted to only reply one message. There are some restrictions depending on the messaging service, but you can just reply multiple messages. Now, if you want to support multiple messaging services, it can also be useful that you maybe want to support a certain set of messages only for Slack and different messages for Facebook. And therefore, BotMan has this group command, which also works pretty much like the Laravel routing groups. So you can just say this set of commands is only can only be applied to the Slack driver, or this set of commands can only be applied to the Telegram, for example. And so you have a nice way to group them together. Now, static keywords are fine, but in the end, we want to capture some user information, so we need to be able to pass like placeholders or wildcards in there. And this works pretty much the same way as the Laravel routing works. So you can just put the placeholders in curly braces, and everything that's in the curly braces will be appended to the callback function. So if I type call me Marcel, It's going to use this placeholder, pass it to the callback function, and then I can use its value to interact with it. And it's also not limited to like just one wildcard. You can place multiple in there, and they will just get added to the callback function in the order where you place it in the string. So, for example, I am Gandalf the White. It gets passed to the function. OK, so then if you need more control of this, this wildcard thing accepts everything you throw in there. You can also use regular expressions. And so it works pretty much the same as with the curly braces. So everything that's in a regular expression matching group will then get passed to the callback function. So I am 32 years old. And then it gets passed. And if I type, I don't know, I am 10 years old, the bot doesn't understand because the keyword isn't really matching. And if your messaging service supports that the user sends images to you, you can also listen to images. So you could have a chatbot that accepts, like photos that the users take, and they send it to the chatbot, and you can just listen to the image that you receive, and you will get an array of images in the callback. And also, this is just depending on what the messaging service supports. It also works for videos, audio, or I think it's on Facebook Messenger and Telegram, where you can let the user send their location, and then they get a location object with the latitude and longitude. So you saw that when I entered I am 10 years old. There's also the ability to add a fallback method that gets called when the chatbot just has no idea what it's supposed to do with the input. So this is usually a good place to just give the user some help information, what to do. So if I type any garbage, it just doesn't know what to do with it. And in addition to just hearing things, there's also a very, very simple storage engine implemented in BotMan that you can use to store information attached to the user that is interacting with your chatbot. So this was actually the code that is in the example where I typed I am 32 years old. There I am accessing the user storage object, so it's bound to the user that enters the message. And I just save the input age stored to the user. So if I type, how old am I? I'm just going to retrieve it from the user and reply it back. So if another user would call how old am I, it would just return nothing. So it's really bound to the user. And besides the user storage, there's also two additional storage types. There's a channel storage, which you can use if your messaging service provides the ability of channels or groups, or for example, Slack, where you have different channels. You can store some information just bound to the channel you're in, or Telegram, where you have multiple chat groups. Then the information is stored to the chat group. And just like an abstraction even higher, there's the driver storage, which is just bound to Facebook, Telegram, whatever. Another thing you can listen on, so right now it was all user input, but you can also listen to events that certain messaging services give you. So for example, if someone joins your Slack team, there's this team join event that gets called. And you can just listen to it and then have like a chatbot that greets someone. Or on Facebook, you have the ability to get the information when the message that you send was actually read by the user, so that you can, I don't know, store the information or do some analytics on your own or something like that. And just another example on Telegram, for example, if someone leaves the chat group, you can say goodbye, Well, obviously, the user wouldn't read it because he already left, but you could do that. And you're not limited to only textual responses. So you can also have it's an outgoing message class, and there you can pass also attachments. So for example, when I type, give me images, it's going to reply with the text and also with an image of the BotMan logo. And once again, this depends on the messaging service that you use. You can also do this with videos. So here's Picklerig. This obviously won't work if you connect it with the Nexmo service, where you just send SMS. Then it's just text. But if your message service provides this, it's very nice to also add attachments. Well, some might say that it's too early for pizza. I don't know. We could order some pizza now. So right now, I think we have everything in place that our chatbot should get the ability to receive some text input from the user to order a pizza, right? It's just one hell of a complex regular expression. We could do it this way, but that's not really how you would do it in a real-life situation, would you? So if you think about it, when you call the delivery service to get like a pizza, you would start a conversation with the person. And he asks you, which kind of pizza do you want? Then you reply to it. And then you say, like, I want some additional hot sauce or garlic or whatever. So this is just a conversation that really goes on in that place. And that's also supported in BotMan. The easiest way to do it is, this is like an inline conversation. It's just you ask, so if I type, I want images, the chatbot is going to ask me which images. And so the next user input is bound to this conversation. So if I type, I am 32 years old, it's going to get passed to this closure and not to one of the previous commands that you might also listen to. So just to show it, I want images. No, clear this. We all like cats. So this will now give me a cat image. So if you think back at the pizza conversation or the pizza example, that wouldn't work with just one question. So in BotMan, there's the concept of conversation classes that you can use to structure your user chatbot conversations that you have. And each conversation has the run method, which is like the initial trigger of the conversation. So this run method always gets called when the conversation starts. And in the pizza example, we would just ask the user, what pizza size do you want? Then, once again, if he answers, we go to the closure with the answer, and we can just save this in a size property on the conversation class. And so what you would do is, inside the what pizza size do you want question, you would ask, once you receive the answer, you would ask the next question. So here we would ask for the topping. What kind of topping do you want? Then again, we take the answer and ask for the address. So that's how the conversation flow works with BotMan. You just ask, receive the answer, and then ask again. So, and in the end, since we stored all the previous answers in the properties, we can just dump out the information. And to start the conversation in the first place, the BotMan instance has a start conversation method, and you just pass it an instance of the conversation that you want to start. So give it a try. I want pizza. So it's asking me, what pizza size do you want? Super large. What kind of topping do you want? We want, I don't know, salami and onions. Where can we deliver a tasty pizza? It's Meer and Fart 300. And then it's just going to dump the information that the user gave the chatbot during this conversation. Now, there's a problem with that. So imagine that you are a pizza delivery service and you don't want people to order a pizza of the size of a wagon wheel. So you probably want to give the user some predefined options where they can choose from. Once again, this depends on the messaging services. This won't work via SMS. But most of the services that have chatbot support also have the ability to add buttons to the questions. So in the pizza example, you just create a question object, and then you add buttons to this question. And each button has just like a text representing the button, and then it's a value that you can store inside your answer. So this one was called Better Pizza. And now this is how it looks like. So I can say supersize, and I want a burger on top of my pizza. Delivered to Laracon. And then here it's XXL, though, so it's using the value of the button that I clicked. And so this is how this code looks like on Telegram, where you have the button support. And this is how it looks like on Facebook Messenger. Now, the next step forward would be to use some natural language processing to let the user enter like more of a sentence, maybe, to give you an idea of what kind of pizza he wants. So the natural language processing works. You give a service a sentence. So for example, it's, hey, calendar, schedule dinner with Nicole at 8 p.m. tomorrow. You send that to the service. So the service will then process this sentence and will respond with a response that we can then use to build it into our chatbot application. So in this example, it will tell me the intent of the sentence was, we need to create a meeting. And this intent has the entities, the name is dinner with Nicole. The invitees is an array with just Nicole in there. And the time, it's, tomorrow at 8 p.m. There are a bit more than those three, but those are like one of the largest ones. Those services that provide natural language processing. There's API AI, which Google bought, I think, a year ago. It's free to use. There's Wit AI, and the most interesting to me, it's Rasa. This is an open source Python package that you can use to host your own natural language processing locally on your machine. So you don't have to give all the user information to a big company if you don't want that. And this is pretty much how you would configure it in the pizza example. So you give the service some example sentences that users might enter. And then you define, OK, so in this sentence, can you make me small margarita and deliver it to blah, blah, blah. Small would be the entity of the size. Margarita would be the entity of the type. And this would be the entity of the address. So you just feed it with some example sentences, and then the service will tokenize user input and figure out how what you want it to do, given on the example sentences. So that being said, you can also use it with BotMan, of course. So this is an example of API AI. And so BotMan has this concept of middleware. So in this example, we create a API AI middleware, give it the token of our service, say we want to listen for it's called action, but it's the intent. And then we tell BotMan's middleware system that every message that you receive should be passed to this middleware. So every message that we get will be sent to API AI, and the middleware will then enrich the message with the information that API AI gave us. And then we can here for order.pizza, which is the intent that we defined on API AI, and tell this here command, okay, but only hear it using this middleware. So if a user types order.pizza, it won't be called. So this allows you to add natural language processing to your chatbot. And as I said, this is possible with an open source package too that you have locally installed. So I don't know, I want a large capricciosa with extra cheese. So this sentence will then get passed to the local Python service, and it's going to figure out, okay, the type of pizza is capricciosa, the size is large, and the topping is extra cheese. And once again, this is not limited to how the user enters the information. You can also say, I am hungry, I want a large margarita with onions. So. So right now, what we did with the chatbot was always to listen for some message that was sent to you and then reply back. But what's also possible is that you originate messages from your chatbot. So the easiest way would be to say BotMan say, then give it a text or some message object, and then the user ID. So this is pretty much the Laravel notification. So if you use Laravel notification system, that's pretty much the same way of doing it. But what gets more interesting is that you can also originate conversations. So for example, you have an event like Laracon, and after that event, you send out using a cron job, you send out a conversation to all the attendees with a conversation class that wants to get some feedback from the users. So, and as I said, as the conversion rates are much higher than traditional emails, this is, in my opinion, a great way to get connected with the audience that you want to target, as it's much more engaging when you receive a Facebook message and then you have buttons where you can say, okay, this was good. Than receiving an email, you have to click on the link, you need to figure out when to do it. And I mean, we're on messaging services all the time, so it's just a natural way to interact with it. Testing. When I developed BotMan, I also wanted to make sure that the code is also very good testable, which I think for chatbots isn't really that made for most of the other services. And this is also just available with BotMan Studio because of how the way the things work. So what you can do is you have in your tests, BotMan Studio also comes shipped with 2 example tests. You have a bot instance, and you can just say, okay, let's just assert the bot receives the message test. And when the message tests gets to the bot, I assert that I get a reply saying hello. And then you can also do this with conversations. So the bot receives start conversation, you assert that you receive a question, then you send interactive message is like the button click. And when you click on the button, you assert that the reply was one of the messages that are in the array. There are a lot of more assertions that are available, but just to give you an example of how this works. As I said with the natural language processing, I briefly covered the middleware section. So the middleware really allows you to enrich the chatbot experience for your user, and there are a lot of entry points where you can hook into to modify messages, to alter the way that you listen to messages. So, for example, if you receive a message, this was with the natural language processing, it's going to call a received method on your middleware instance, where you can send the message like to API AI. You can use a logger to write the message to a file. You can send it to an analytics service, so you know which messages you actually received. There's a captured middleware, which you can use once you're in a conversation. It will be called once a user answers a question. So you get the answer, you can manipulate the answer or do certain things with it. You can also alter the way that message matching works. So out of the box is regular expressions. But you can also alter it, so maybe you want a middleware that messages can only be listened to from certain users. So it's a chatbot that lives on Facebook Messenger, and there's a group of commands that is only available to the admin. Then you can just write a new middleware and tell the matching middleware, OK, only match this message if the regular expression matches, and also if it's one of the known users. Yeah, heard. The middleware, pretty much, it's just like the received message, just when a middleware was actually matched, so that you can also manipulate it there. And just at the end, there's a sending middleware that gets called before the message gets sent out back to the messaging service. So there are a lot of ways to hook in your custom like enterprise applications, analytics services, logging. It's really extendable. And yeah, just this would be how you call it. And in addition to, I think it's 8 drivers that are supported out of the box, you can also write custom drivers. So if you use one of the messaging services that are not supported by BotMan in the core, you can just create your own driver and support it if you want. And it's also not limited to the HTTP protocol. So you can, for example, write a driver that works with IRC. So there you can extend it also to connect it to like an intranet bot that is only available to your intranet application services. So that's pretty much all I have for BotMan and about chatbots. If you want to know more about how this all works, I just tagged the 2.0 release yesterday while we were on the way to Laracon. You can find more about it at botman.io, which is the official website. It has a pretty large documentation, which you can look through. And also, if you're into chatbots or want to get more about it, I'm going to launch a video course, which you can find out at buildachatbot.io. So if you're interested, you can visit it and enter your email, so I will just notify you once that's available. That's it for me.